My name is Ken Schafer. I'm the president and lead programmer of Innoventive Software, and I'm here to talk about desktop pre-visualization. Now, a lot of what people are talking about is how to avoid shooting bad 3D. For very good reasons, because there are a lot of people have invested a lot of money in the projection systems and whatnot, and everybody fears that if there's too much bad 3D, nobody will buy the 3D sets or go to the 3D movies. However, I think that's missing the point. What we really want to talk about is how to create great 3D, not how to avoid just bad 3D. So, to create your great 3D, obviously, you don't want to give your audience headaches, nausea, or any of the other bad things that can happen with, again, our bad 3D. And you want the visual depth to be integrated in the story and enhance it, in the same way lighting, music, art direction, whatever. But lighting and composition can itself really enhance your stereo depth, because there's a lot more to stereo perception than just parallax. And with all of the focus on the rigs and interaxials and far distance and whatnot, that very often these other non-stereoscopic depth cues get really sort of forgotten, left aside. I'm going to show you a quick clip, which is from the class Stereo 3D Filmmaking, the complete interactive course, that is specific about non-stereoscopic depth cues.
In the case of a stereo window violation, the non-stereoscopic depth cue that contradicts the stereo is called object masking. For your brain, close objects always mask far objects. You can use this effect dynamically to enhance the depth perception of your audience by using moving shots, especially crane or lateral dolly shots, where close objects move faster than far objects and mask them. There are many different kinds of non-stereoscopic depth cues that can help build a better 3D image. A perspective running from the borders to the insides of the frame usually works very well. Use to your advantage geometric lines like railroads, streets, roads, skyscrapers, and so on. Also, try to use shadows, both the ones objects cast on the ground and on themselves. They give important cues about location of objects, but also about their 3D texture. That's why some directors of photography, when they work in 3D, like to use more directional lights to emphasize shadows. And you can also use texture gradation, the size of objects, and even air transparency. In large landscape shots or smoky rooms, fog or smoke are for your brain a good indication of distance, and it enhances the perception of depth. What you must always remember is, the more depth cues you give to your audience, the better their depth perception will be. So give them some 3D information. For example, try to avoid large monochromatic zones like pure blacks in a dark room or pure white skies. They yield no information, no detail. All these can literally make or break a shot.
It's all well and good to compose a really nice stereo shot, but they got to cut together well. You have to make sure that there's a consistent visual space, that the depth from one shot to another doesn't jump, all of these kinds of things. And, of course, you want to control your stereo depth. I heard an interview with the folks who did How to Train Your Dragon, And they said that they actually found that audiences became acclimatized to stereo, and that they actually had to pull back on the stereo when they wanted to have something big so that it had a lot of impact. So again, you need to control all of these things. And of course, you don't want to just throw in the stereo as an afterthought. Not naming names, but we've all seen movies where it's done a 3D conversion with no thought of what the stereo depth was during the shooting, and they don't tend to work all that well. Okay, so how do we plan to do this? Well, how can we put all of these elements together so we are designing our stereo depth at the pre-production stage, which is our goal? So, and as I was saying, that this depth design, even if you're shooting planning for conversion, if you plan it into the design at the pre-production stage, your conversion will be orders of magnitude better. And of course, if you plan it and you're shooting for 3D, then not only will your shoot go smoother because you will have solved a lot of problems before you get on set, but obviously the visual richness of the depth will be a lot better. So our answer to this is stereo 3D previsualization. What exactly is previsualization? Now that may seem like a stupid question since a lot of people use the word, throw it around, but when we talk to people, it's very often that they have different ideas as to what it means. And as we see here, the most common perception of it is animated storyboards. Something on the order of this. Big action sequence, big effects, and I think this will run over again. Yeah, here we go. And that is because that these are really not sort of just pre-visualization, but effects previs. And they're done both to integrate the VFX into the shot, to prepare the VFX, figure out how to do the live shot, all of those kinds of things. However, of course, this is extremely expensive, which means that if you aren't doing a big budget movie, you really can't generally afford this kind of pre-visualization. And even if you are, it generally is only used in those scenes in which the VFX are vital. It also can have this strange effect of the tail wagging the dog. And a perfect example of this, again, another panel I was on. The folks who did the Fantastic Four movie, Rise of the Silver Surfer, said that they literally were given the scene with the tunnel where the Silver Surfer flies through it and whatnot without really a finished script, which meant that they pretty much had to invent the scene. And then the director DP sort of tweaks it, but the effects drove the visualization. So, again, because mostly due to expense, but these things take a lot of time, and revisions are very expensive, that it can, of course, lock you in so that, you can do some tweaks to the pre-visualization, but otherwise you can't really play around and explore, experiment, discover, any of that kind of things with the effects pre-visualization. So, James Cameron's solution. You probably all have seen the incredible technology he built. He had like a little wheel thing with a monitor on it, and he could walk around the soundstage as if you were walking around in Pandora, which is incredibly cool. It's also incredibly expensive. And the thing that people forget is that to do that kind of thing, you also need a huge number of support people. The modelers, the animators, mocap folks, all of those kind of people supporting it so that there is a world for him to walk around on. Where does that leave the rest of us? Well, without even sort of getting into Stereo 3D yet, let's sort of break down how we want to prepare for any shoot. First thing, of course, is the previs has to be cost efficient. So it can be used on all sequences, two guys sitting at a table, which can be one of the hardest things to shoot in 3D. But so really, keep it cost efficient so it can open up all of your scenes, not just the effects ones. We want to give the creative people, the director, the cinematographer, the creative control, not the previs people. And, Avatar gave it back to James Cameron. We want to give it back to you. So, what is the traditional answer? The time-honored storyboard. Now, there are a lot of issues with storyboards, the big one being that they are an artist's idea of what a shot's going to be. It's not really focused on how to get that shot. And even within that conception, there can be lots of problems with forced perspective, having you discover that you get on set and you have to put a camera through a wall, or you need such a wide lens that you get unwanted distortion and all those kinds of things. And of course, for Stereo 3D, although some people have come up with some pretty interesting ideas with color coding and thickness of lines to show depth, it's again a depth that is created artificially without any sense of, is it going to be possible? And of course, they can't really display photo accurate depth. So our answer, desktop previsualization. So if we look at this storyboard on the left, and compare it to the image on the right, you can see that even within a 2D image, that there's a huge amount of variation. We can do it with a long lens and close in. We can do it with a dolly, far out, whatever. That there's a lot of ways of capturing this same image. And so, especially with stereo, we really need to think it through. So, our desktop previsualization is cost efficient, and basically you pay for the software and then you can either run it yourself or you can hire previs artists who get paid at the level of storyboard artists to run the software. We have, had PAs build the sets, and then the director or cinematographer, steps in and places all the camera and does that kind of work. But it's orders of magnitude cheaper. It also really allows the filmmaker themselves, the director, the cinematographer, the stunt coordinator, whoever is using it, to explore and experiment. And that's the big thing. I mean, as you saw in that image, we can move the camera forwards, we can move it back, we can tilt it up, tilt it down. We can do all kinds of things with it, pretty much anything that you can do on set. And you can do that in your prep rather than on the set when you have a really expensive crew standing around. For Stereo 3D, it also allows you to work with the depth within your prep, just like you would framing or composition or any other image issue. We define desktop previsualization as optically accurate 3D previsualization that anybody can use. You don't need to be highly computer skilled, and you don't need an incredibly wildly powerful computer. I mean, the more powerful it is, the better, but it runs on, a notebook, which is what I'm doing this demo on right here. And another key element, again, is, like James Cameron's system, is it's got to give the filmmaker the ability to turn the preparation into a creative endeavor, rather than handing it off to someone else, getting it back, and then saying, no, it's not that right. But really be able to explore, experiment, find better images, solve problems, all of these kinds of things. To do that, it has to exactly mimic the properties of the cameras you're going to use. And of course, for Stereo 3D, that also means the stereo rig. So, much to your surprise, I'm sure, this really describes our product. In order to start with optically accurate previs, we have to select the camera that we're using and the frame size and the aspect ratio. And if it, of course, doesn't have the one you want, you can very easily define the parameters of that camera, and at that point the program will know what it's going to see at any given focal length. Of course, it also mimics the exact functionality of your physical camera equipment, which means that if you're using a dolly like this or a tripod or whatnot, It's only going to allow you to crane as high as that piece can go. It will, for a stereo rig, you can set the parameters of what your interaxial range is, all of those kinds of things, and it will limit you to the capabilities of the equipment you're using. So this is the interface of the main program. Right there, circled, is a camera on the set, and the gray triangle is the angle of view of the camera that it's seeing at this given focal length for this specific camera. In the upper monitor row, and you can think of this like a television control room where we have monitors at the top and a live view in the center. You see the view of that camera, and you see that's a red camera, and the red camera is underneath so that you can easily know which is what. And this is an overhead blueprint view, which is always available in your upper left-hand corner, but can be the live view also. And it's very easy to use this view to drag in actors and props and build sets and so on. If you want to make a camera view, the live view, all you do is double click and it automatically becomes your live view. Okay, in the lower left, you will see that it shows us our current focal length, what our angle of view is, what the camera height is. Seems I have that in meters. You can have it in meters or feet, whatever you want. Down here are our camera controls, and they are labeled in a way that filmmakers are comfortable with. Pan, tilt, zoom, dolly, crane, and they function just as you would expect. To our left are object controls, and they allow you to elevate, tilt, scale, etc. the selected object or objects once they're on the set. This here is our object library, and the base program comes with about 1,300 base objects. You can import other objects from FBX format, which is the standard interchange format that Maya 3ds Max export. So if you do have VFX people working, they can often give you low-res versions, and you can play with that within the software. We also import VRML and SketchUp, which a lot of art directors use. And of course, right over here is our 3D tab. Okay, enough PowerPoint. Let's actually run the program. So this is the same interface, of course. And let's start by building a room. So the default is an empty, beautiful green field, but let's edit this and make it an interior. So what I will simply do is apply a carpet texture to that. So let's go to flooring, carpets. Let's do, that's a nice one. Okay. And then of course we want to repeat it so it looks nice. And that's good enough for the moment. Now, let's build, say, a bedroom and attached bathroom. To do that, all we do is go into Room Builder. And all I do is literally draw the room. Now, if you notice, it shows the dimensions of each wall here and here. Also does it down here so that if I want to specifically say that this room is, say, 25 feet by 15 feet, I can numerically type it in, 15 and a half, or let's make that 20 just to make it a little easier to work with. Okay. And now I'm going to draw our attached bathroom, and we will adjust that so it snaps together right there. Okay, great. Now we're going to put in a door, and all I do is select, of course, the door tool, and I click where I want it to go, and I can reorient the door simply by dragging on this dot and clicking it around. Now, if you notice also, it shows the distances from the wall, so that this distance between this edge of the door is 3 feet 2 inches. The door's width itself is 3, and the width from distance from that wall is 3 feet 4 inches. Again, I have complete control here if I want to make the door width 3.6, so on and so forth. Let's drag it down. Let's move it down to here, and let's switch it around so that it opens that way. And let's throw in a couple of windows. Let's put them over here. And again, we get the same things about the distances. And again, I can make them freeform or enter the numbers down here as desired. And let's throw in a second window. And this one here, let's get into our selection tool. This one was 4 foot 2 inches. So let's make this one, oops, go away. Let's make this one 4 feet 2 inches. Sorry about that. And say build rooms. And there we go. We now have our bedroom and attached bathroom. They are empty. And this camera here is showing what is in them, which isn't much, of course, because the walls are that's looking out the window. That's the door. Not a whole heck of a lot going on right now. So let's dress it. Well, let's start with the bedroom. So I can simply type in here. Helps if I type the right thing. Bedroom. So let's drag in. Let's go for this bed. And we want to rotate it. Now, there are these 3 control balls, and if you notice when I put the cursor over it, it tells me what it's going to do. So tilt, scale, spin. If I click on it and drag, I can spin this dynamically, and you see it spinning in this monitor up here. If I right-click it, it resets, and if I just click on it rather than click and drag, then I can enter it as a numeric value. So let's do that. And we will drag this bed to here. Now, if you notice, it kind of sticks on the wall. It doesn't go through it. That makes it really easy to just put it straight up against the wall, and you don't have to worry about, exact positioning because it does it for you. I mean, it keeps you from doing something bad, rather. Let's put it that way. So we'll put in a bedside table. Now, this is a pretty big bedroom. And we can duplicate this and then put this duplicate over here. And I think there was an alarm clock. Let's put an alarm clock on the bedside table. By the way, let's throw in a camera and it automatically points at whatever is currently selected. And these are floating cameras. There's 2 types of cameras. There are floating cameras, which you can just experiment with. They don't have any physical size or limitations like the physical equipment cameras do. So they're very useful to set things up initially. Anyways, and let's drag in a bureau. And the other thing is, let's go and set our walls to give a wallpaper. So what we can do is, sorry, I went back into the edit set location parameters, and I am going to go to wallpaper, and let's make this floral borders. Sounds very nice. So now all of our walls will have these floral borders, which of course makes it a lot more interesting. Okay, let's make this our live view. And let's go into our lighting, because that seems rather bright. And we can bring our lighting down a bit, so it's not quite so harsh. And let's drag in an actor. So what do we want? Let's go in and let's give a woman. I will drag in a woman, and she automatically appears where I dragged her. And as I drag her onto the bed, she automatically goes into a relationship with the bed. And one of the great things about this program is because it knows that you are doing previsualization as distinct from general purpose modeling, then it understands how objects relate to one another. So we have a number of predefined poses with her in the bed. So we can say left side seated against pillow. And that's the basic object interaction. Now let's drag her back so that she's sleeping. Yeah, that's good enough. If we double click her, then she comes into what we call the green room, because this is where we can change all kinds of things like her clothing and her hairstyle without affecting her orientation on the set. So since she's in bed, let us give her, instead of a skirt, let's give her pajamas with baggy legs. Let's get rid of her shoes. And for her shirt, let's give her pajamas with spaghetti straps. I'm just going to zoom into her, which I can do by clicking my middle mouse button. Since she is asleep, we can use our expression editor. And what we'll simply do is we'll go and close her eyes. So we'll find, I've missed her eyes. Blink left and blink right. So what we do is we'll simply close her eyes because she's asleep. And we can store this as a named expression if we want. So we can just say asleep. And then in the future, instead of having to find those two things and drag it down, we can just apply the existing one of asleep. We can also do things like we can age her. We, of course, since this is Hollywood, and let's scroll our view, we can, of course, make her more busty, we can make her fat, all these kinds of things. And the guys can be buff and fat too, so it's, not just the women. We can change her facial shape. So although it already comes with, I believe it's 64 unique actors in 4 different ethnicities, we can also further adjust that to really create individual characters. We can change her hairstyle and so on, again, to really create a specific character. So let's find a good hairstyle. I like that one. And then we can then further control the color of that. So let's find her hair. We can make her a blonde, and so on. And if we want, we can even make her, oops, that's not what I wanted. What we'll do is we will select her face, and we will apply to that a scar. Okay, so our scar is right here. Let's get that moving. So we're going to put that in on her right cheek. And if I move this away, we can see how it's showing up on her. Let's get this over here. And we can change how transparent it is, how so on and so forth. So we can give them tattoos, you can create your own, all of that kinds of things. You have a huge amount of control. Let's just apply this, and now she is on the bed with that scar and so on. Now I dollied through the wall. Again, this is a floating camera. It doesn't have any physical size or limitations, so that's why it allowed me to dolly through the wall. So let's instead work with physical cameras. So what we can actually do, and I'm just going to delete that one for the moment, is we will go back to our props, and let's go to our dolly tracks. Let's start with some tracks. We'll drag in some curved tracks. We'll drag in, let's go for some short straight tracks, so 8 feet. Yeah, that looks reasonable. We will turn this so it's roughly in the right thing. We don't have to really worry about how exact it is. And then as I drag it over there, it snaps onto the other track. We'll put another 8-foot one here, and we'll do that. Okay, we'll add in our dolly, and we'll just go for a Fisher 11. And as we drag it to the tracks, it automatically snaps onto the tracks. We will now select a head, and we have fluid heads, we have geared heads, and again, the program limits you to the physical capabilities of your equipment. So, and everything snaps together, so we attach that head, and since we're talking specifically about stereo, let's go. We have side-by-side rigs, we have beam splitter rigs. Let's go for, and you can, as I said before, make them specific to your equipment, interaxial range, and so on. So let's drag in our beam splitter head and we'll attach our beam splitter. Now you see these two lines, that's the view of each of the two cameras in relationship to each other. And let's make this our live view. Now we're viewing this in anaglyph at the moment because that's the only way I can do it for this presentation. But we have all of these display formats, including horizontal interlace, checkerboard, side-by-side, quad buffered, so that if you have a more powerful display, one that can do it natively, then we can do that, or you can do it in anaglyph on anything. We can also directly output to HDSDI, assuming you have the right graphics card, which means you can drive, full cinema quality projectors. We can do it on second displays so that you can have your stereo on one display, all of this kind of flexibility. For the moment, we'll ignore that. And we're going to pan over here, and if you are lucky enough to have 3D glasses, then you'll see something pretty bad. Because at the moment, our camera is completely parallel. So what we do is we will click on the 3D tab. What this shows me is my interaxial distance is 65 millimeters. My post-image shift is 0%. Now, you're all saying, but wait a minute, 3D depends on your screen size, which of course it does. So what we'll do here is we'll click on the screen and we can define exactly what our target screen size is. So if we're shooting for a television screen, they generally recommend about 10 feet so that you can handle a really big wide screen. Our maximum positive offset, which for a screen of 10 feet is not a big deal. If you're doing a 42-foot screen or an IMAX screen or whatever, that does become a big issue, but we'll still leave it at 2.5. And another interesting thing that a lot of people are talking about these days is allowable divergence. And basically the idea is that if I'm really close to a screen and I'm a little bit diverged, it's very painful for obvious reasons. If I am further away from the screen, then the angle of the divergence becomes smaller and smaller and smaller until it's basically acceptable. You can have the program take that into account if you want. It's particularly useful if you're doing an event-based thing where you know it's going to be shown in one theater, you know exactly how close anybody's going to be. And in this case, that third of a degree per eye at 10 feet actually gives us quite a significant adjusted max offset. However, we're for the moment just going to go set that to 0, at which point it's just going to go with the 2.5. Now, people have different ways of shooting. You can shoot converged, at which point it will show the cameras coming in and out as degrees of angulation, or you can shoot parallel, have it show it as a percentage offset, or you can have it show this a pixel offset. And if we're shooting for 4K or we're shooting for a 2K or whatever, we can put in exactly how many pixels is our target, and then it's going to show us the post-production shift in pixels. Okay, that's basically the screen settings. Now we have a rig solver. And what this allows us to do is basically define where we want the screen plane. So let's make this comfortable, and I simply click there, and that put the screen plane there. What we're seeing here is actually part of our camera rig. So what we're going to do is we're just going to bring the camera rig into the green room. What it's seeing here is the chair, the seat. So let's get rid of the seats to solve that problem. Okay, so now we have a quite comfortable 3D image with this pillar at the screen plane and our far distance over here. Now, if we go back to the blueprint view and we say show all, and let's scroll a bit to the left. Okay, our far horizon is, okay, here's the trick. What you see here, and let me zoom in, is this blue line is our screen plane. Now, our far horizon is at infinity because we can see through this window. So let's go in here and take let's go in here and go for a tree. And what we'll do is outdoors, and we'll choose trees, and we'll choose a background tree because that'll block the window better. So what we'll do is we'll just drag it in here. Whoa, that's big. And let's make it so that it blocks our window completely, so it is the farthest visible object. And let's elevate it. This is our elevate button. We're going to elevate it down so that it completely fills our window. So if we go back to our 3D tab, what it's showing us is the distance to the maximum positive offset, after which we would get divergence, is effectively infinity because we were looking through the window out into the sky. Our distance to the screen plane is 4 foot 7 inches. Farthest visible parallax, closest visible parallax, and total seen parallax. Let's click here again. And now, because we blocked this, the distance to maximum positive offset is 49 feet 3 inches. Distance to screen plane is 4 foot 7 inches, and so on. As I move my cursor around, if you look over here and watch here as I move it back on the screen, it shows me exactly what the distance is to the object under the mouse, what its parallax is, what its on-screen percentage offset is going to be, and so on. Now let's crane up, and here's a perfect example. The camera, because we have it on a dolly, it can only go so high. So it's warned us that that's the maximum that we can do for that specific camera. And let's actually pan and tilt in. Let's zoom in. Let's go over here. Let's put the screen plane here. So again, you see how everything shifts because of the screen plane. Now, when you have the framing you like and the shot you like, that you can simply hit Store Shot. Now, because it's stereo, it has the option to give you an automatic stereo verification. And what it's showing here is that we are going to have a window violation on the left of a fairly small amount, 0.8 inches. So that's not going to be a big deal to cover up with a floating window. Same over here. We have a bottom screen violation, window violation of a little more. The way our brains work, a lot of people are able to handle bottom screen violations without any problem. Some people ignore it altogether, and you have the option of don't display this dialog if all it would be a top or bottom. Anyways, we're going to continue snapping the shot, and it now shows up in our shot manager. Oops, that's way small. Let's make it bigger. And we now have our stereo shot in here. Let's open up some interesting, let's see where we got here. Alice. This is a very good one. So one of the things we talked about before was turning the Stereo 3D from a problem to be solved into a creative endeavor. So we have a very low angle shot. This was Alice, because Alice in Wonderland, and I'm saying she's big. Now, we have a couple choices. Right now, her hand is in negative space, and we can see that by showing that it's right here. If you look here, again, parallax percentage, it says it's negative, and that's a choice. Now, what we could also do is we could put the screen plane here, at which point it shifts the whole parallax, and I believe the screen, yeah, let's make this, again, a 10-foot screen, because that will show the parallax better. And if you notice, did you see that little shift? That's the difference between it setting the parallax for a big screen or a smaller screen. Obviously, if you're doing it for a bigger screen, then the parallax has to be smaller because it gets magnified as it's projected. So we have different choices that this, by having the screen plane at her fingertips, it pushes her up into the distance and makes her seem larger. We could also have it here, which is then going to push her hand out again into negative parallax, or we might even go for a little more by putting it here or here, and then her hand is going to come out even more, so that you can explore, you can experiment, you can try different ideas. Another idea I had was, what if we took an object that came out of the screen, we then did a reversal and had it jump back into the screen? Would that work? Going back to our 3D scene, the wolf's nose has a negative parallax of, and again, look here, of negative 2.71%. So he's jumping out of the screen. And then in the reversal, his tail has a negative parallax of roughly the same thing. Now, we can then take these images, and one of the cool things the program could do is automatically generate in-between shots. So I snap this shot, and this shot, and it will generate the in-between ones automatically for me, so that I can create animation, and we can just play this as a slideshow. And they're stalking her, and then she's coming in, and she turns, and he comes out in the other thing, and that was pretty fast. Let's play this again. You can export it at any resolution you like. Let's do it at a larger size. Again, this happens pretty quickly, but I think you'll find that it works fairly well. So they're sneaking up, she turns, they jump, and bang. And so that experiment worked. And that's one of the great things about this, that you can explore, you can experiment, you can discover, you can do all of the kinds of things that you can't do with storyboards. It's too expensive with traditional previs, and it allows you to really hone your vision, hone your stereo, and make either your traditional 2D movie or your 3D movie as powerful and effective as possible. Last thing, getting back to the shot manager, when a shot is stored, not only is the shot itself stored, but all of the information about the shot is stored. So here's our camera, here's our screen plane, here's the angle of view of the camera, and this is the blueprint, overhead blueprint view, and you can print these both together. Here's all of our camera information, the angulation, the interaxial, screen plane, distance to maximum offset, all of that. So that not only will your crew get the information as to what the shot is, but they also get how to create that shot. And one of the things, I know I said I'm finishing up, but last sort of thing, one of the very cool things you can do is we can create automatically generated HTML pages with blueprint images, all of the camera information, and it's going to do it automatically for you so that you can jump from one scene to the next. It wrote the whole thing, and let's view it. And so here we have our shots and our camera information, the actors visible in the shot, the camera equipment that's on the set, so on. And we can just click and go through these, and we see how these things change. We see how our distance to screen plane changes, distance to max offset changes, all of those kinds of things. You can post this on an intranet, and it really opens up the communication between the different departments and makes the shoot go so much more smoothly, because everybody knows not only what the shot is, but how you plan to get it. And it makes the lighting and the camera department not have to run to the director and ask them all the questions, and vice versa, so that everybody is working much more smoothly. The shoots tend to be that much more efficient. There's a huge amount more I could get into. You can set the location of the shoot, the date and time. It will automatically give you the sunrise, sunset for that day. Let's just set this on the East Coast somewhere. Let's set it in Providence, Rhode Island. We can then, as we move the day, so the sun moves into the right position in the sky, the shadows change direction as they move, so on. Our sunset's at 6:15. Our midday is on this day because we're in October. If we change this to February or March, then obviously our sunset changes, our sunrise changes, and so on. And that's all I'm going to show you now. So thank you for spending your time watching. Again, this was FrameForge Previs Studio 3D, and our website, of course, is frameforge3d.com. Thank you.